Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are cycle testing cells. Let's get started. Here in front of me is 32 280 amp hour LiFePO4 prismatic cells. From these cells, 16 will be selected for our 48 volt battery build. Not only will we be capacity testing these, but we also will be matching them based on capacity. I call this batch and match. So I purchased these cells about 1.5 years ago, and I'm just now opening the boxes. They've been sitting on the shelf for 14 months. So I originally purchased 48 cells, but I used 16 of them straight away. So we'll be able to compare the data from these 32 cells against the original 16 cells. We'll be able to check for capacity loss and also voltage drop. So if you're storing LiFePO4 cells for any length of time, 6 months or greater, you should do a maintenance charge every 6 months. But before we get to cycle testing, I want to show you the case that I'll be using to build this 48 volt battery. This is the Apexium 280 amp hour DIY case. When using 280 amp hour cells, we'll have a total battery capacity of around 15 kilowatt hours. So I just wanted to show you guys one thing. Look at these cables. These are the parallel cables, so they go from one box to the next. And check this out. This is the inverter set, which go from the battery bank to your inverter. So they got lugs on one end, and they got these, I don't know what you call these plugs. They got these on the other end. But these are lockable plugs. So once they lock in, you have to press that button to release it. But I noticed something interesting. Notice the orange? You recognize this orange color? This is EV grade cable. They use this cable to run to the EV motors in EV cars. So it's pretty heavy duty, pretty good stuff. I will do a detailed review of this box as well as the battery build in a later video. But for now, let's continue on with cycle testing. Alright, so here's the last two cells that I need to test. This one I already tested, and this one I'm going to use to show you guys how to cycle test cells. But first, we're going to do an internal resistance test. So looking at the cell, before the manufacturer ships these out, they charge them up to a voltage of 3.29 volts. This is a 280 amp hour cell, and it has an internal resistance of 0.21 milliohms. So what we want to do is test it with the battery tester to see A, if the internal resistance has changed, and B, if the voltage has dropped since the time it's been sitting on my shelf for about 14 months. The positive on the positive lead, negative on negative. Look at that, 3.29 volts exactly. This has not changed in 14 months. It's been sitting on my shelf. I literally just pulled these out of the box. 14 months they've been sitting, and it hasn't changed at all. Internal resistance is still good. It's 0.165. So that's actually lower than the rated 0.21 on the label. So not bad. Alright, so if you haven't met Big Blue yet, and this is Big Blue. It is my 40 amp 3. It's actually 0 volts to 5 volts battery tester at 40 amps. So you can actually program it through the front screen here, but it's always easier just to hook it up to your PC. These are the charging probes, and it comes with these voltage sense leads right here, which sense the voltage, and a USB connector for your PC. So I plug this into the PC. And there's some software you can install on the Windows PC. I'll show you that later. Take your cell, take your positive lead, put it on the positive terminal. Take our negative voltage sense lead. We're going to put it right inside here on the stud. Take our negative right on the stud, just like that. And our sense, negative sense goes there. Now we're ready to test. Okay, so once you're in the software, you can connect to the tester, just like that. And then the first thing we're going to do is I want to show you my plan that I've been using for charging these batteries. So this is our plan. Phase 1, it's shipping / storage, discharge, and we get about 112 to 115 amp hours out of that. So when they ship these batteries, they keep them at a relatively low state of charge, and that's to protect them during shipping. And that state of charge is about 112 to 115 amp hours. This is a 280 amp hour battery, so that's only that's not even half. It's about 40%, which is where you want it when you're either shipping or storing your battery for long term, longer than 6 months. You want to charge your battery to this level. And then phase 2 is 2.50 volts, so basically 0, all the way up to 3.65. This is a full charge. And from there, we've been getting on the other cells anywhere from 294 to 298 amp hours. And after that, phase 3, we go from full charge, 3.65 volts, down to 2.50 volts, a full discharge. Now that also yields about 294 to 298 amp hours out of a 280 amp hour cell. Now phase 4 is 2.5 volts, back up to 3.33 volts, which is my storage / build state of charge. So when I build my batteries, I keep them at a relatively low state of charge. That's for better fitment, because believe it or not, when you put the batteries in the box, they actually expand slightly, and it can make it harder to put the batteries fit them into the box. So yeah, you want a relatively low state of charge when you're building batteries. So I found 3.33 volts is pretty good, and that'll put you around 66 amp hours. And all the tests are run at 40 amps. So the first test we're going to do is our discharge, or initial discharge. So that would be this one here, phase 1. So in our software, we're going to go discharge, constant current. We're going to run it at 40 amps. And the cutoff voltage is 2.50, which is the bottom of any LiFePO4's cell. And what I like to do, I found some kind of a glitchy thing with the software. So just to be sure, the way the software works is when you click start, it sends these parameters to the device. So if you were ever to lose connection, like the USB connection got lost or the PC restarted, and for some reason the device didn't save those parameters, it might not have the accurate parameters which you typed in. So in order to be sure that that actually takes place, is I like to start it, that sends the parameters to the device, then I hit stop, and you actually disconnect and reconnect. And it's going to read the values from the device, and that's how we know for sure that the device has the proper parameters stored that we want to do the charge cycle from. So it's discharge, constant current, 40 amps, 2.50 volts. And we can click start. This is going to take probably about, I want to say, 3 hours for the initial discharge. So we'll come back when it's finished. Okay guys, we are back. It took 2 hours and 46 minutes to discharge this battery. So that completes phase 1, discharge 112 to 115 amp hours. So if we look down here, our begin volt was 3.32, our cutoff volt was 2.5, and the capacity which we discharged the battery ended up being 111 amp hours and 354 watt hours. And you can see from our discharge curve, we started here at 3.30, and it stayed fairly steady right in the 3.2 range all the way to 2 hours and 13 minutes, and then dropped rapidly. So we're going to begin phase 2, and we'll come back after phase 2. But first we need to save the data, so we're going to save this. And this app will output a Excel file, and it'll output a image. So this right here is the Excel file. So it has all your beginning and ending stats right here. Average volt, energy, capacity, cutoff. And then it has literally per second. Each row is 1 second of data logging here, all the way to the end. You can see as the voltage rises as we go down in time. Or actually, in this case, it will decrease. So we're decreasing. Save this. This is cell 32. We'll save the image, which is basically the screenshot there. We'll save this as well, because what we're going to do is put this in an Excel file so we can sort all the data and find the matching cells. Alright, so phase 2, we're starting from 2.5 volts. We're going to do a charge, full charge. So charge constant voltage. We're going to charge at 40 amps. We're going to charge up to 3.65. And we're going to have a cutoff current of 2 amps. So again, we're going to start, stop, disconnect, connect, make sure it reads in our values, charge, constant voltage, 40 amps, see, I must have did that wrong, that was my bad, 3.65, 2 amps. .65 volts, 2 amps. Alright, this would take about 7 hours. Alright guys, we are back and our charge cycle has completed. Looks like it took 7 hours and 30 minutes. However, you'll notice that the capacity is 292. That's because I stopped and I had to replug in my laptop to another outlet. So we're missing about 5 amp hours here. But this is the charge cycle, so it doesn't really matter. I'm using the discharge cycle for the data in order to use for a match pack. We're going to begin the discharge cycle now. I got it set to discharge constant current, 40 amps, and the cutoff voltage is 2.50. So this is the important one. The discharge is the important one. So you have to kind of decide whether you're going to base it on charging or discharging. And I like to base it on discharging. Okay, we're started and we'll come back when this is finished. Alright guys, so we are back and the full discharge is complete for phase 3 and it took 7 hours and 21 minutes. So I was looking at the capacity, check this out, only 294.60 amp hours. So this cell is the lowest cell in the whole bunch of 32 cells. So we probably won't be using this in this particular battery build. So the next phase, we're going to go ahead and do phase 4 and just charge it up to storage level, build level, and then we can correlate the data in our Excel file and make our selections for the build. Alright guys, we are back and we have finished our last cell. So we have almost 64.5 amp hours charged into that cell. So this is cell 32. This completes all the cells. What I've done now is I put all the data into an Excel file. And then I sorted on amp hours. So from lowest to highest, we got 294.30, the cell number 3 being the lowest. And cell number 29, 298.40 being the highest. So what we want to do now is pick the best cells that are closely matched for our battery. We're going to need 16 cells. Well, first I eliminated these guys because these are just too low. And there's not enough of them to make up the battery. So we wanted to find where all the amp hours, where all the capacity is landing, you know, like the buckets basically. And the majority of it fell between 295.20 and 297.70. You got these outliers, these guys up here, and you got these guys down here. So we just eliminated those. And I focused in on these groups right here. So I have 295.20, cell 27, all the way down to cell 24, coming in at 296.80. And then we want to find out what the deviation is between the lowest and the highest cell in the pack to find out how much deviation is there. And this, between this set right here, this grouping, the deviation was 1.6 amp hours. So between this number here, the lowest, and this number here, the highest, we got 1.6 amp hours difference. And this is just the count of the cells. Then I was looking further and I realized, oh, there might be a better grouping here because we have 296 and we have quite a few 297s as well. So I marked a second group which kind of interlaps with this other group from here to here, and look at that, only 1.5 amp hour deviation. I know you're probably like, it's just 0.1 amp hour difference, yeah, but the whole point of this build is trying to get a very matched set. So I think we're going to have to go with these guys right here. So that's this set here. So yeah, let's do that and then see what happens. On to the next step. Now that we have tested and matched all the cells, we can batch them into a group to be used for the battery build. Batching and matching cells is very labor intensive. That's why you end up paying a premium for batteries with matched cells. Alright guys, so now I want to show you the difference between the 32 cells we just tested and the original 16. So what I did on the 32 cells, I calculated the total deviation. So from the smallest cell, 294.30, and the largest cell, 298.40, we had a total deviation of 4.1 amp hours. I also added the average capacity in amp hours for the 32 cells down here, 296.43, and the average energy to 965.31. So here's our original 16 cells I tested 1 year ago, and again our deviation, total deviation, was 4.0 amp hours. So here's our average for the 16 cells, 298.35, and for the 32 cells, 296.43. And that's a difference of 1.92 amp hours degradation. So in a 1.5 year time span of the cells sitting on the shelf, we've lost 0.5 to 0.7% in terms of capacity. So we can assume that in a 1 year span of your cells just sitting on the shelf, you're going to lose about 0.5% capacity per year. So taking a look at the smallest cell on the original 16, look at the lowest cell, 296.70. Now if we look at our 32 cells over here, 294.30. So that definitely jives with the approximately 2 amp hour loss. Our highest cell originally when I test these, look at that, 300. We're getting well into 298, a lot of 298s, 299, and 300. One cell, 300. That's pretty crazy. But the highest we achieved on the 32 cells, look at 297, 297, 298, and 298.40. That's the highest we got. So we can definitely see the numbers have definitely degraded. So when buying cells from overseas, the reasons why you want to capacity test your cells is A, to make sure you've got what you paid for. If the cells are advertised as 280, you want to make sure they at least give you 280 amp hours, right, the capacity. Capacity testing will also help you to determine your total deviation in your cells. That'll help you to determine what kind of balancer you need. If you have a 4 amp hour deviation, you might need a pretty heavy duty balancer, like 2 amp, or you might need an external balancer to quickly balance those cells. The more cells you have, the longer it will take. And the more deviation you have in those cells, the even more longer it'll take. It's like multiplicative, right? So if you have 4 cells and it takes 8 hours to balance at 2 amps with a 4 amp hour deviation, imagine having 16 cells, right? 16 cell battery with a 4 amp hour deviation and a 1 amp balancer, okay? It could take probably 4 days. I think that's the biggest problem people go wrong when they build batteries is they don't let it balance. They don't realize how long it actually takes, or they'll use their solar to actually charge it. But we'll get into that in detail when we actually build the battery. So you want a capacity test to find out what to expect of your balancer, or what you'll be expecting of your balancer, and maybe that'll help you to drive the decision you make when purchasing a BMS. So the particular BMS I'm using in this battery has only a 1 amp balancer. That's why I want to batch and match these cells to get the smallest deviation between our cells so it won't take as long. If you don't want a capacity test, you don't have to. You can buy these cells from them, and knowing what the standard deviation is, that's what you can expect. You can just throw them in the box and then wait for them to balance. It might take a while. The cell distributors should start putting the standard deviation on their cells, or they should give you an idea of what the lowest and the highest would be, so you can get to know what to expect. But that's why you pay for, when you pay for batched matched cells, They're very labor intensive to test these. It takes about 15 hours to test one cell. So 32 cells, I was testing cells for a month straight. So yeah, very labor intensive, and that's the big downside. So where to buy cells? On my website, and I will link it in the description below, I have a battery build page. It's a 12-volt battery, and in there I have my contact where I bought these cells, and they're one of the larger distributors in China, and I had good luck with them. So yeah, and when you do purchase your cells, I would say if you have more than a 4 amp hour deviation in your cells, then whoever you bought them from is not a very good seller. So just keep that in mind. The standard deviation, no more than 4 amp hours. So if you're interested in a battery tester, take a look at this one by ZKETech. It's a 40 amp. I'll put a link in the description below for this unit. I got this from Amazon actually, but you can get a good deal at Battery Hookup. And I have a coupon code for Battery Hookup. Description below. If you want to learn more about balancing and how the BMS deals with it, I made a detailed video about balancing matched cells versus balancing unmatched cells. In that video, I balance 4 cells, a set of 4, and I time it, and I balance a set of 4 unmatched cells, and I time them right side by side, and you can see them balancing side by side, and you can see which one takes longer. So that will be in the description below, and I'll also put a card up right here. So yeah, remember, capacity test your cells, and if you're going to be sitting them on a shelf for a year, you're going to lose about 0.5% per year. That's all I got for this one. See you on the next one.